All right, hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Beyond Compliance webinar and podcast series. We're really grateful that you're all joining us here today. Great to see so much interest in this topic. We've been talking about this recently. If you've been here in the past, there's definitely been a lot more conversation and interest around topics in the area of operations and productivity and OEE, and so we're really excited about this topic today. KPIs are something near and dear to our heart here at SafetyChain, as we do a lot around the analytics. And we are bringing in the big guns. We're bringing in our friends over at Alchemy Systems, Jeff Chilton, who's the VP of Consulting, who I'll be introducing here in just a moment. But we'll be talking today about the critical KPIs your food plant operations might be missing. And Jeff and his team put together a lot of really helpful content that I think you're going to enjoy. So thanks for stopping by. I think you're going to really appreciate the content we're going to dig into today. So if you're stopping by for the first time, thank you, welcome. This is a series that we've put on now for just almost a year and a half. We've done a lot of long-standing, more regulatory and industry updates, and this was kind of the request of our community to have something a little bit more tactical, something that really digs into the how-to. And so we bring in practitioners and experts and consultants like we have today that can really share what's happening out on the plant floors, and hopefully some tangible tactical things you can take away and implement in your own companies. And so we put these on for you, and we encourage you to share your thoughts, your feedback, topics you'd like to hear, even presenters you'd like to see. And we'll do our best. You keep coming, and we'll keep putting these on for you. So we're glad you're here, and thanks for coming back. As I mentioned, this is a series that we put on here as a sponsor. We're very proud and honored to do this for our community. You'll hear a lot about the strategy and the tactics that are being used in plants from experts like all of you that are on today, and where we can offer our expertise is on the technology side. So as you go through these, as you're thinking about different ways to improve your productivity or your profitability or even compliance, that's an area we can help you at SafetyChain with our food quality management system. We've got a lot of really cool, fun stuff coming on, and encourage you, if you have not checked this out already, go visit us at SafetyChain.com. And for those of you that are our current customers, we know we have a lot of you on here as well. Thank you. We appreciate you, and glad you're here as well supporting this. Few things, just some housekeeping as we get started. One thing is we like to keep these, professional but informal, right? So the goal here is just to get you a bunch of really great content, and part of that is to engage with you when and where we can. So this is for you. So ask questions. This is such a great opportunity to tap into the minds of the experts, and so we'll save our formal Q&A for the end, but I'll be monitoring the questions here, and we'll get to as many of these as we can. Jeff has offered kindly to take any questions we're unable to get to offline with he and his team, and they even have a little special offer at the end as well that we'll put out to everybody. So stay tuned for that. You'll notice that only on the right, I think it's on the right-hand side, there are the panelists. You'll just see us there. So when you do fire off a question, it's not being broadcast to everybody. It will come into us directly there. Cover the first big question always, which is about the recording. Yes, we are recording, and yes, we'll be sharing this along with access to the deck that Jeff has prepared here today, and that'll come in the following days here right after the webinar. And last but not least, we do have Ann Grace on the line here from our team at SafetyChain. She'll be monitoring any technical questions, so if you have anything like that, you can use your chat box, reach out to her directly. If you have the questions for us in the webinar, there's a questions box, and we encourage you to use that one there. And as I mentioned, we'll get to that at the Q&A at the end. So without further ado, we're going to dig into our training topic today. As I mentioned, the critical KPIs your food plant operations might be missing. And the reason you are here is to listen to an expert on this topic. And we're really pleased to have back to the Beyond Compliance series, Jeff Chilton, who's the VP of Consulting Services at Alchemy Systems, was one of our more popular presenters last year, and certainly an expert on this topic, and grateful to have him back, both as a presenter and an ongoing partner with Alchemy. For those of you who are not aware of Jeff, I'm sure you've seen him speak or have worked with him in some capacity through the years, but he is the Vice President of Professional Services at Alchemy, has over 30 years experience in the food industry, specializing in food safety, quality assurance, and plant management. Before Alchemy, Jeff spent 18 years as a consultant, helping clients achieve and sustain GFSI certification under all the codes, SQF, BRC, FSSC, and also providing USDA and FDA regulatory compliance services for HACCP and food safety plan. He is a certified SQF auditor, SQF consultant, preventative control for human food lead instructor, and International HACCP Alliance lead instructor. So he knows his stuff. We are so glad to have you, Jeff. Welcome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. And thank you very much, Brian, for the kind introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to work with SafetyChain again.
Oh, you bet. Well, we're glad to have you. I'm excited. I'm ready to take some notes. So I'm going to get out of the way and let you dig right in here, my friend.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone on our webinar today for joining us. And welcome to the webinar. We do have a great topic today on critical KPIs that your plant may be missing. You may often hear the term operational excellence. And while this sounds good, it's a frequently elusive and vague term. And today, we're going to be defining a clear path to show you how you can achieve operational excellence. One of my personal favorite sayings is, you treasure what you measure. And defining the right key performance indicators, or KPIs, is absolutely imperative for the success of the business to be able to minimize your cost and to be able to maximize your profitability. Once you define and start measuring the KPIs, you really do treasure the information. It's simply part of our human nature to want to improve and to get better at anything that we do, including food plant KPI performance. So let's take a look at our agenda today and see what we'd like to review. So first, we're going to talk about the management system to be able to achieve operational excellence. So I want to set a little background and context with you before we jump right into the KPIs. And then secondly, we'll be talking about how you can set specific KPIs for safety, quality, yield, and productivity that help you maximize your return on investment at your companies. And then next, we'll talk about how KPIs can also be used to lower the cost of quality. And we'll talk about the 4 elements of the cost of quality itself and reduce the number of corrective actions that may be necessary for your company. And then next, we'll talk about also how the accelerating rate of regulatory change and even GFSI certifications can also have an impact on your KPI choices as well. And then we'll spend some time talking about how to measure continuous improvement, which is what it's really all about, and also provide incentives for your staff to keep them engaged and motivated throughout the process. And then last, we'll be able to share some resources to help you achieve your operational excellence as well, and then be happy to answer any questions that you have at the end of the process. First, at Alchemy, we believe that KPIs should not be measured in silos of individual functional departments. However, KPIs need to be managed in an integrated operating system to be able to optimize performance. So KPIs should really be aligned across departments to be able to promote the overall vision, mission, values, and objectives of your organization. So I do want to take a moment and just set a little background context for this. At Alchemy Consulting, we define this integrated operating system as our TOPS system, for TOPS, which stands for our Total Operational Performance System. And we have 2 fundamental beliefs around our TOPS system. One is we focus on the 4 key attributes of safety. And safety does include both workplace safety for the people and food safety for your products. But safety, and then quality, and yield, and productivity. And these are the 4 key pillars within this system. And the second key fundamental that we also have is to set a priority for those, and the fact that a higher priority should never be sacrificed for lower priority. So safety comes first, because we certainly don't want anyone to get hurt or get sick from the products that we make. Quality always comes second, because we want you to have satisfied customers that'll be happy and be buying the products that you make over and over. Yield comes third, and then productivity comes fourth. And many of you may be surprised to see that, because usually more focus goes on the productivity, but bear with me and you'll see how all these work together and ultimately can produce a better system for you to make sure that you can optimize your own performance. So within our top system, we actually have 3 different levels, and you have to reach the 3rd level before you can ever really start to achieve operational excellence. But let me walk you through the first 2 levels first. So level 1, as you can see in this diagram, talks about having a foundation in place for customer and regulatory compliance, because it's absolutely imperative for all your companies to be able to meet your customer expectations in terms of your compliance with your specification requirements, and then beyond the customers. And you also have to be able to be in compliance with all the regulatory standards as well, whether that may be USDA or FDA or even OSHA and EPA standards as well. But it really has to start by having that foundation in place. And then once you have the foundation in place, then you can move up to level 2, and that's where we establish the performance system for these 4 key attributes. So if you think about safety, quality, yield, and productivity, what the performance system does is actually identify what are the top KPIs in each one of those attributes that you need to measure, and then set up a measurement system for those. And then the 3rd level, when you can finally reach the operational excellence level, is when you can actually start driving continuous improvement, so that you've been measuring these items over a period of time, and then you start raising your targets and raising your goals in these particular areas as well. And that's when you can really achieve the operational excellence to be able to demonstrate that type of continuous improvement. The problem that we see at many companies is that they just seem to overemphasize one attribute, and that's usually productivity. But what we often see is that, if we have the blinders on and we're doing everything we can to maximize the productivity and just get the product out the door, then often that can result in sacrifices in quality or yield or safety that can ultimately have very damaging and very costly consequences to your company. So we want to make sure that, again, we put these in the right order as we go through this process. And the last part that I want to share just about your integrated operating system is, in addition to the 4 key attributes, we also define 4 parts of culture that should be associated with this process. And that starts with commitment. And that would be commitment to the company and commitment to this process to be able to drive continuous improvement throughout your organization. The second part of our culture really focuses on behaviors. And that's where we're encouraging and engaging employees to be able to do the right thing, even when no one's looking over their shoulders as well. And then the third element of our culture is to work as a team. And a lot of this process can be managed in groups of teams to have the employees more engaged in this process, and actually have the employees help set their own goals and then raise those goals up after they're achieved as well. But it does encourage a real teamwork aspect to the process. And then the fourth part of our culture focuses on service. And when you think about service, we really think about 3 different levels in this case. So the first level is customer service, because we obviously do want our customers to be satisfied with products that they're buying from your company. But beyond that, we also talk about service to your peers, of the individuals that you work with at your company, and how we can be of service to one another through this process to help each other grow through the process as well. And then last is the service to the company and what we should do to contribute to the success of the overall company. So now that we've set a little bit of background in the management context, we'll move on to the key performance indicators can really be used to help reduce your cost and also to be able to increase your profitability. So what we're going to do is take each of these 4 key attributes, and we're going to dive into deeper details to be able to analyze really what are we talking about, and then secondly, what are those key performance indicators that you can utilize in your own operations to help measure these things. So the first one, let's focus on safety, and again, that's the safety of our people and the safety of our food products as well. So from a people safety standpoint, certainly our goal is to try to prevent any type of injuries to our employees. And then from a food safety standpoint, we also want to make sure that no one ever suffers a death or foodborne illness as a result of our products. So when we define these in a little bit more detail, when we think about effective people safety and what that would be included in that process, I'd really define that as employees practicing safe work habits in a safe environment. So there's 2 parts to this. The first part is the employees doing the right thing to make sure that they're not compromising safety and that they are practicing safe work habits. And then secondly, of course, there is an obligation to the company and the employer to be able to provide a safe working environment for the employees themselves. And then when we think about how do we define effective food safety, there's really three elements to that. So I define it as proper employee product handling through validated procedures in a sanitary environment. So the three pieces to that start with the employees and the way they're handling the product to make sure that they don't jeopardize the safety of the product in the way that it's being handled. And then secondly, by following the validated procedures. So these are procedures that cover all the requirements that are needed to be met in your facility and that they're validated to assure that they're achieving the intended effect of that. And then the third element of this is to make sure that we do have a sanitary environment that we operate in, that we prevent any type of environmental contamination or any type of contaminants that could occur to the plant. And unfortunately, there's far too many case studies where we've seen where failures in these areas can actually have catastrophic impact on a company. And as you look back over the last 10 to 15 years or more, there is a long list of companies, and large companies, some of them billion-dollar plus companies, that have literally gone out of business almost overnight due to large-scale product recalls or foodborne illness outbreaks that have been associated with their products. And then secondly, I want to give you an example of another company that we were familiar with that experienced a number of deaths from a workplace safety standpoint. And this was a large international corporation, and it happened at multiple facilities that they had. But in one single year, this company experienced 6 deaths at different locations that they had throughout the world. And it had a huge impact on this company, both in the culture of the company and the employees that are working there. And then, of course, it had a regulatory consequence as well because they had to deal with the OSHA investigations and the fines that were associated with those types of processes. So we want to make sure that we're protecting our people and that we're protecting our food supply first. So let's take a minute and look at this slide. And at the top of the slide, we're really talking about the people and the workplace safety KPIs that you could use. And the most common KPI in this area is to be able to measure the total incident rate. And this is a great way to measure your safety performance and also to be able to benchmark it across your industry to see if you're operating above or below average. But the incident rate is a simple calculation where it takes the total number of injuries or illnesses that have occurred at your facility, and then it multiplies that number of incidents times 200,000, and then it divides that number by the total number of hours that were worked at your facility in a given year. And then that's what gives you your actual incident rate. And there's great data available that you can see exactly how your company does compared to overall general industry and even specific companies in the same industry that you're operating in as well. So I'd certainly encourage you to know and to be able to measure those total incident rates. The second one is to look at the lost time incidents, and not only the quantity of how many times you had a lost time incident, but also the number of days that have been lost through that process. And then a third one that you can use for workplace safety certainly relates to your workers' compensation cost to see how much that your company is spending on workers' compensation costs. And I personally led one project for a company that I worked with in the industry when I actually worked in the industry for 15 years prior to starting the food safety consulting. One of my stints in the industry was also a director of Safe Workplace, and I worked for this large corporation, and we actually drove our workers' comp costs down by $7 million a year just by focusing on our safety programs and then case management processes as well. But you want to look at that overall workers' compensation cost. And then, of course, a few other things that you can look at from a workplace safety standpoint would be the quantity of accidents that you're having. So how many OSHA recordable type accidents are you having? But don't wait until something's already gone wrong. I would also encourage you to track and look at the number of near misses that you have. And if you have an effective safety culture in place, you'll also be encouraging employees to report when that near misses occur so you can actually do an investigation and take corrective actions then before it actually results in an OSHA recordable incident. And then last, from a workplace safety standpoint, you'd certainly want to look at the quantity of OSHA and or EPA non-compliances that you may have. So those are some good ones to measure your workplace safety system. And then at the bottom of this slide, we really start focusing on the food safety KPIs that you have. And one of the best sources that you can go to are your customer complaint logs, and to look at a trend analysis of your customer complaint results. And for these, specifically looking at foreign material from a food safety perspective, and also anything else related to food safety that could be labeling issues or could be different types of foodborne illness complaints as well. And then secondly, I'd encourage you to measure your microbiological trends. So if you have specific testing procedures in place for environmental testing in your facility, and also for finished product testing, to look at the trends of those results to see what your pass rate is of acceptable microbiological results. And then the third thing that's good to measure from a food safety perspective is the deviation history, or how many times that you may actually be failing to meet your critical limits that are identified with either critical control points that are in your HACCP plan or within your preventive controls that may be identified in your FDA food safety plans in those facilities. And then a few other food safety KPIs certainly could be related to regulatory compliance. So in USDA facilities, they commonly get what's called a non-compliance record, or an NR. And we've seen some facilities with as few as 0 in a year, and we've seen other clients that have had as many as 1,600 in a year. So you may want to look at how many of these non-compliance records that you may be receiving and try to continue to work those on a downward trend as a KPI as well. Then, of course, in FDA facilities, you could look at warning letters or 483s that you may receive from FDA. And then one of the other major things that I like to evaluate in the area of food safety KPIs are internal and external audit compliance. So certainly with any external audits, you're going to be getting a score and a rating and know how many non-conformances have been identified during that process. So you want to see what those scores are and try to show continuous improvement over time. And then hopefully for your internal audit processes, then hopefully you're using a scored rating system or identifying the number of non-conformances there as well. And then, of course, last, there certainly should be a zero tolerance policy for product recalls that may occur or for any type of foodborne illness outbreaks. So the second element that we want to take a look at are the quality attribute, and different types of things that we can measure. And we define quality as meeting consistent quality in order to be able to meet the customer specification requirements, and then ultimately you want to exceed those customer expectations as well. So we really define consistent quality as having satisfied customers who are buying your product on a repeat basis, hopefully week in and week out, and then looking at the growth of sales by product line for you. And then to be able to have an effective quality system, we really define that as each employee accepting their responsibility and making contributions to the product quality. And then ultimately what you want to achieve is sustainability of your quality systems. And we really look at that as having defined measurements and specifications built into the process. So you're actually building quality into each step of the process rather than trying to sort out non-conforming product at the end of the process that has to either be reworked or rehandled or possibly even condemned at the end of that process. So next, let's take a look at some of the specific KPIs that could be used to measure your quality system. And one of the ones that I like the very most is the right the first time inspection, and then the pass rates for those types of inspections as well. And I hope your company has this. We don't see this in very many clients, but it's certainly a good idea. So this is a process that would be implemented to where every time that you start producing a new product or you change over to a new product, then it would be an inspection checklist. So you're looking at everything from the labeling of that product to the various specification requirements for the products and the weight requirements and all as well, to make sure that you're producing the product correctly, and then ultimately to have a pass percentage of those. So if you're not utilizing that type of process, I'd certainly encourage you to do that as part of your quality systems as well. And then secondly, you can certainly take a look at those customer complaints again and look at your trend analysis. So here we're looking for those types of trends that would be related to quality issues. So I hope you're taking a look at your customer complaints and you're actually sorting them out and trending them by the nature of the complaint. So in this case, it could be a flavor complaint or some type of sensory complaint in that area, but you ought to have different types of trend analysis on each type or category of complaints, and then be able to measure that and see, again, to try to drive a specific amount of performance improvement over your baseline results. And then next, and this is one of the most critical ones in terms of quality KPIs, is measuring your non-conforming product. So if you think about internal type of failures, when you have product that's been made out of specification and now you have to put that product on hold, then what I would really encourage you to do is to be able to track not only the number of incidents or how many times that actually occurs, but also to track the quantity of the volume of the product that's being put on hold, and also any associated cost of that product, which could include the labor and the packaging materials and, of course, the product cost itself. But if you really track those, you'll really see what the cost of the quality failures are, and then help give you some specific data that you can use to try to drive those numbers down over time. And then there's a number of other specific quality KPIs. We should also look at supplier quality cost as part of this process, and you want to do what you can to hold your suppliers more accountable to be able to meet your specification requirements through this process. So there should be inspection processes when those materials are being received to see whether or not you may have to reject the product at the receiving step that may not meet your specification requirements. And I would encourage you to keep what you would call a supplier corrective action log as well, for specifically how many times have you had to request corrective actions by your suppliers, and then hold them accountable for their cost and their compliance through this process. And then other quality KPIs that you may use is to look at customer rejects. So after you've produced a product and shipped it to a customer, how many times could that product either be rejected and returned to your company? So you may have a return material authorization that has to be filled out, or you may have customers that are filing claims against your company for being out of specification. So you certainly want to track that type of data as well. And then a few other quality characteristics certainly could be your pass rates on sensory evaluations and shelf life results. And then definitely from a label compliance standpoint, you really want to have a zero tolerance policy for any type of labeling errors that could occur in your facility to make sure that you're helping avoid the risk of a recall due to not properly declaring all the allergens on your labels. Then the third attribute that we're going to turn our focus to will be maximizing the yield. And when we talk about maximizing yields, we're really talking about maximizing the quantity of the product that's getting into the finished product packages that you're producing. And then part of that is also about minimizing waste throughout the production process. And the last part of it is about product giveaways, and to make sure that you're meeting your net weight requirements, but at the same time, not giving away too much product above the stated weights on your package labels as well. And ironically, I'm actually sitting at one of our client locations in North Carolina right now as I do this webinar, and we're actually doing a TOPS assessment to help them identify ways that they can improve their profitability. Plus, this particular company has an opportunity to grow their business by as much as 30% at one single time with a new customer that they're having negotiations with at this point in time. So they asked us to come in and do an assessment of how we can help them increase throughput and increase their yield and their profitability as well. And one of the key things that I've just identified just yesterday is looking at some of their packaging processes where they're packing, in this case, it's a barbecue product, in 5-pound vacuum packages and also 1-pound little totes or tubs that it's being packed in. And just from a giveaway standpoint, we've identified that they're giving away as much as 7% of the product in net weight giveaways on the 5-pound product, and as much as 9 to 12% of the product on the 1-pound product. And just by having better controls for that in place and to be able to measure it on a regular basis, we've already identified cost-saving opportunities that would equate to greater than an $800,000 a year profitability improvement for this particular company just on this one area. So, maximizing yield does offer a greater return on investment than just productivity increases by themselves, and that's why we put yields third instead of fourth after the productivity. So when we really talk about maximizing the yields, you really do want to have a yield standard for each one of the products that you make, and then be able to measure what your actual yields are and then have a reporting system in place to show any variance, both in terms of percentage and also the dollar value of what that yield variance would be, and then to have methods that you can control the waste and report on that through each stage of the production process as well. So when you think about what type of KPIs you can use specifically for the yields, is where as much as possible, we'd like you to be able to measure the process yields at each step of the manufacturing process. So just depending upon the types of products that you use and the manufacturing processes that are used, a lot of companies will measure a manufacturing yield first, where product may be blended or formulated, and then they measure packaging yield, and then a total product yield. So if you started with a green weight of X pounds of product, then how much product did you actually get in your final packaged product itself? So you certainly want to measure it at each step of the process, and that way you can control it and know where the problems are when they do occur. And then from a packaging standpoint, we talked a little bit about the net weight giveaway and being able to control that. And, best in class companies will typically be able to control those net weights usually at 1 or no more than 1.5% giveaway. So if you're giving away more product than that, it's certainly going to be a large cost impact for your company. And then again, measuring your waste loss percent through that process as well. And then the fourth and the final attribute that we're really focusing on are the productivity. And productivity is the fourth priority, and it's certainly, it's last, but it's definitely not least in this case, because productivity is still really important to make sure that the employees are working productively, and also to make sure that you're actually getting the maximum throughput that you possibly can at your individual facilities. But the key point is the fact that we try to get companies to focus on the fact that the safety and quality can't be sacrificed just for productivity, and yield shouldn't be sacrificed, because again, the yield's going to add more dollars to the bottom line than what the productivity would be. So to be able to set up an effective productivity system, certainly it would start with staffing standards. So for each of the production lines that you have, there should be a specific number of people that are required to run those lines. And then there should be an inspection on a daily basis to make sure that you're using the right number of people on the line and that you don't have excess labor sitting around in different areas. And then secondly, there should be efficiency standards. So you should know that based on the quantity of labor hours that are invested, of how much product should be produced based on that, which would ultimately give you a line efficiency reporting, which the more you can do that on individual production lines, then the better off you are to get those teams involved and to be able to control that process. And then the last key measurement in terms of a productivity system is measuring your total labor recovery. So your total labor recovery would be a measurement of both your direct labor, but it would also include all your indirect labor that's used in the process. So essentially, to measure that number, what you're doing is looking at your total labor dollars paid for the entire company and dividing that by the total pounds produced, at least on a given weekly basis, and see what that labor recovery number would be to be able to measure that. So some of the specific KPIs that can be used from a productivity standpoint certainly should be the line standards and outputs and efficiencies like we talked about. But the other key thing to look at is really the volume throughput, just like the example that I gave at the company that I'm working at right now, that if this company picks up this new customer, they could have a 30% increase in volume. So for them, it's a tremendous challenge on how they can increase the throughput and then be able to maximize the capacity that's available in the plant. And then beyond that, it's determining, what type of capital investments and additional equipment may be required to be able to produce that quantity of product as well. And then other types of productivity KPIs, we just talked about the total labor recovery. So you do cover the indirect and the direct labor as part of that. And then a lot of people like to use the overall equipment effectiveness, or OEE type measurement. And that just really depends on the type of products you make and the consistency of the production. If you're producing the same product for a large scale basis, then without a lot of changeovers, this may be one that you could use. When you look at the OEE measurements, you're really looking at the availability of how much time you have available times the production rates or the productivity rates that are being generated, and then multiply that by the quality factor for what percent of non-conforming product is being made as well. and that would give you a measurement of the OEE. And then we talked about the line staffing standards and all. And then another big one that we haven't talked about, but I really encourage companies to look at, is your schedule attainment. So, if you're scheduled to produce 10,000 cases of product in a given shift and you only produce 9,000, then you need to be measuring those types of numbers. But the other thing to look at related to that would be the number of schedule changes, how many times you're having to suffer through changeovers that slow down that process, and whether or not you could have a process that could help streamline the SKUs that are being produced to be able to reduce that changeover time. And then two last things that you could look at from a productivity standpoint, certainly the maintenance availability of the equipment, to be able to measure your downtime minutes and versus your operating minutes that's available for the equipment. And then the last thing would be your customer fill rates, to make sure that you're fulfilling 100% of your customer requests and also delivering those orders on time as your companies and customers expect as well. So those are some of the key KPIs for each one of those four attributes. But let's move on next and also talk about how KPIs can actually help you lower the cost of quality and the number of corrective actions that are taken. And I understand, I've worked in manufacturing environments for over 30 years, and there's a lot of different obstacles for manufacturers. So, there's always an excuse or a reason why things can't be done. But, when I was a plant manager in a facility, one of my favorite sayings then was, give me results and not reasons or excuses why things can't be done. So we got to find ways to be able to overcome these obstacles to be able to generate the results that you need to. But I understand certainly there's pressures on cost and quality and meeting the customer demands, growing your business on time, and then management issues along with turnover for both your management staff and your hourly employees. So, oftentimes companies are lacking leadership training and just not following through the way they're supposed to. So the companies many times end up fighting the same fires day in and day out instead of actually fixing the problems and being able to move on to the next set of problems. So there are a lot of obstacles, but, at the same time, don't let these become excuses as to why you can't get something done. But let's work to find a way to overcome those obstacles to be able to generate the results that are going to be most helpful for your company. So when we think about this concept of cost of quality, I really want you to think about four different parts of quality costs themselves. And two of them are failure cost, and those are the ones that are on the right-hand side of the slide. And this could be an internal failure. So these are the ones that you catch inside your plant when you have produced out of specification product. So as a result, you've got an internal failure and you're having to put product on hold and then having to rework or rehandle or condemn that product as necessary. And then the second type of failure would be the external failure. So these would be the ones that are caught by your customers. So now you already have the transportation cost and other issues affected with that product. So we do want to measure both of those. But, from a positive standpoint, what we really want to do is look at what are the different types of prevention costs that you can build into your quality system that would help you reduce the number of internal and external failures. So from a prevention cost standpoint, this could include things such as the staffing that you utilize for your quality assurance department, to have appropriate staffing to do the inspections that are necessary to make sure that you are producing product within specifications, and any other costs that you have to try to make sure that you're building the quality in and preventing those failures on the other side. And then the fourth type of cost to think about for your quality systems are appraisal cost. So the appraisal costs would be any costs that would be associated with testing or inspection of the products. So if you're having to send out environmental monitoring tests or finished products to be able to test for different types of attributes and all as well, those would all be considered to be appraisal cost for testing to make sure that you are meeting your quality requirements as well. So when you think about how can you lower that cost of quality, then what I would encourage you to do certainly is to invest wisely in the prevention cost and make sure you have the staff in place to be able to try to prevent any type of failures that could be associated with your process. And then obviously you want to measure and then reduce those types of both internal and external failure costs and track those appropriately. And then next you want to spend appropriately, but at the same time not excessively, for appraisal cost. And, I'm certainly all for environmental testing and testing of finished products where necessary to make sure that you're meeting the requirements and that you do have a sanitary environment as well. But at the same time, you don't want to oversample in those areas to make sure that you're controlling those testing costs as part of the process. And then ultimately defining what the key quality KPIs are and measuring and tracking those, and ultimately generating a cost trend analysis. And this is the real tool that quality assurance managers can use to be able to demonstrate to senior management the effectiveness of your quality organizations. So ultimately, the goal of a quality cost system is to make that system as least costly as possible. So if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, that would be the lowest cost number. So, that's where the company's quality system is designed and planned and organized to be able to prevent detections and defects from being produced. And then the middle one, that's more costly, would be when the plant finds and corrects the defects internally. And then the ones that are most costly are certainly the ones when the product's already gotten all the way to the customer, and then you have to have claims or you're able to bring that product back to your facility as well. So one of the ways that you can improve your quality systems as well is having effective corrective actions and preventative action process. So, I mentioned one of the real challenges for many companies is that they fight the same fires day in and day out, or week in and week out, instead of really addressing what the root cause of the problem is. So, and this is an area that we see where companies have so much opportunity to be able to improve, is to have an effective corrective action and preventative action process. So when something goes wrong, you really take time and you identify what was the real root cause of this problem, not just the symptom, and make sure that we fix the symptom of it, but really dive deeper to figure out what the root cause of the problem was itself. And there's a lot of different available methods that you can do that. And I would encourage you to use different methods depending upon the severity and the type of the incident that you may have. And certainly out of root cause analysis tools, a lot of companies use the 5 why method. So they're asking why 5 different times to try to get back to the root cause. And that's a great way to do it and a simple way to do it. But, for more significant failures that may involve larger quantities or large dollar losses of the product itself, then you may want to consider some other alternatives like the 8D or the 8 discipline method. Is certainly a popular one that's very effective through that process. And then the other one is the A3 method, and it should be the A3 method, but that's a problem-solving tool that's commonly associated with lean manufacturing processes. But it's really a good detailed tool to help you get back to what the root cause of the problem is. And then once you've identified the root cause, then you're going to be able to identify what are the right corrective actions to be able to take to fix that problem, and then really what are the right preventative measures that you can take to be able to keep that problem from happening again. And then the next item that we want to talk about are regulatory and audit standards that can affect KPI choice. So I wanted to expand this a little bit more than just the accelerating rate of regulatory change. And certainly we've seen a tremendous amount of that with the FSMA regulations that have been implemented over the course of the last several years. But not only the regulations, but also GFSI systems drive KPIs as well. So if your company is certified to any type of the GFSI standard, such as SQF or BRC or FSSC 22000, then you should know that right in the food safety policy statement, it does require you to establish food safety objectives. And those food safety objectives should be the KPIs that you've measured that are related to your food safety and your quality systems. And I can't tell you as a certified SQF auditor how many audits that I've done that I've cited nonconformances for because the company didn't include that requirement in their written food safety policy, or even if they did include it, then my next question is, what are the specific objectives that you use to measure your food safety and quality system, and then how often do you measure those and review those results? And oftentimes companies just have not formalized that process, and it does lead to audit nonconformances. But you really should to be able to have the best food safety and quality systems that you possibly can. And when you think about objectives there, that at least the ones that you're going to present during an audit standpoint, certainly you could have objectives for your audit results that you want to score at least in the top 2 rating systems for your 30 third-party audits that are going to be occurring. You should also have objectives set for your customer complaints, and that could be either based on the quantity of the complaints, or it could be based on an improvement in the baseline results. So if you had 100 complaints last year and you want to have a 15% improvement, that would be your objective, and now you're shooting for 85 complaints this year. And then there should be other objectives related to corrective actions and the number of times you have to take corrective actions related to your food safety and quality systems, along with the microbiological results, to be able to make sure that you're meeting your pass rates in terms of the microbiological results, and then, of course, the zero tolerance for recalls and foodborne illness outbreaks as well. And then once you define those objectives, they really do need to be reviewed during the management review meetings. And I hope you're doing these at least on a quarterly basis, but preferably even monthly. You would consider those objective results as part of the inputs for review during the management review meeting, and then talk about that, and then certainly set improvement targets for that process. And then from a regulatory standpoint, both USDA and FDA have zero tolerance policies for Listeria monocytogenes and ready-to-eat products, so there may be performance standards like that you have to meet. USDA certainly has a lot more performance standards that have to be met as well, but then you can also look at your environmental monitoring results and your recall prevention too. And then last, we'll talk about measuring continuous improvement and being able to provide incentives for your companies to be able to help this. So what I really encourage our clients to do is choose the KPIs that are most relevant for your operation. And they're really different in every single company, just depending upon the types of products that are being produced and the nature of those products. But, you want to choose the ones that offer the greatest return on investment. And what we always encourage clients to do is choose at least 5, if not more, but at least 5 specific objectives under each one of those key attributes for safety, quality, yield, and productivity. And then that'll give you something good to measure as part of your KPI systems. And then if you've measured these in the past, you can look at your baseline performance and then target a specific percentage improvement over that. Or if you haven't done that, you can always start measuring it and start building that history up. And then once you build the history, then you can set the goals from there. And then SafetyChain is certainly a great tool. I hope all of you out there are using SafetyChain to help you manage your food safety and quality systems as well. And SafetyChain has some great SPC capabilities, especially for companies that are monitoring the net weights of the products like they were making that I mentioned earlier. And also, a lot of companies have specific size requirements for the products in terms of length or width or thickness of those products. And the SafetyChain itself is a great tool to be able to measure and to be able to produce the SPC charts that are necessary to be able to control your processes and to be able to minimize those giveaways. And then a couple of last comments on our TOPS process. When we work with clients to help them with this process, we really have a 4-phase process that we go through. And the first phase is kind of optional. It just depends upon the maturity level of the company that we're working with. But some companies say, hey, we're just not ready for this yet. So we actually need to start by doing some supervisory training and maybe even an assessment of the culture that we have in our company. And that's certainly one way to start the process. Or otherwise, if the company is ready, we have a very formal TOPS assessment process. And that's what I'm going through with 2 companies this week in training to help companies understand what this process looks like. And then phase 3 is once we identify where those opportunities are, then we'll help them with either a line optimization or a specific product process. Like in this case, we're trying to help this company improve yields on a specific product. And then fourth, once we've demonstrated success in that area, then we do a scaled rollout to other areas of the plants as well. And then we do have, a very formal assessment process. So we look at those 4 key areas of safety, quality, yield, and productivity, but then also the 5th area of culture as well. And then out of all the questions that we have on this checklist, then we will rate these as either as a company hasn't started this process, or either that it's emerging, that they've started it and beginning to start doing some of the things that they need to, or the third option is that the program is established And then fourth, certainly for those better companies, that could either be advanced or best in class as well. And then ultimately, we give company a TOPS assessment result system here that shows you exactly where you stand in those 5 areas and which ones are strong and which ones are weak, so you know what you can do to improve that process over time. And then, so for a summary of some of the top benefits, we can certainly use this process to help our clients improve their profitability and definitely improve performance for the safety, quality, yield, and productivity. It's also a great way to get both your management and your employees engaged in this process, and to be able to provide incentives and recognition. So you have opportunities to be able to celebrate the success with the employees, and certainly ways that you can build in bonus requirements and objectives for the bonus programs for management personnel as well. But ultimately, it does lead you to an optimized workforce and culture, and gives you a great path for operational excellence and continuous improvement. So last, I just want to real quickly share just a few resources with you that's available to you, and then we'll open it up for questions. So first, certainly Alchemy is best known for our training platform. And out of the Alchemy training system, it comes with a full library of workplace safety and food safety videos that you can use to train your employees, which can also be customized for each one of your locations. And then it gives a great way to deliver that training where every employee has a remote and they're answering questions throughout the training to verify the effectiveness of the training. And it even includes some games to get them engaged in and to have winners there. And then the Alchemy Manager system automates all those training records, so you have paperless documentation that's audit ready all the time. So you can prove to either GFSI auditors or to regulators that you've met all the training programs that are required. And then to be able to reinforce that training, we have both what we call our huddle guides, where supervisors can give quick on-the-floor talks, or our coach mobile tablet application as well. And then secondly, we do have the Alchemy Academy, which is a great learning management system and a separate platform for e-learning training. And this is a place where you can go to get online PCQI training, or basic and advanced HACCP training. And we have a number of other courses for your own professional development, including basic and advanced internal auditing. We also have corrective action and root cause analysis and SPC courses, and continuing to work on adding new courses every quarter. So I encourage you to look at the Alchemy Academy for all your e-learning needs for professional development, and it saves you a lot of time and money to have to travel to public training programs, and you can take the training at your own pace as well. And then, of course, I'm real proud of the team that we built at Alchemy Consulting, that we have a great group of consultants that are located all over the country, that are in different plants every single week, both here in North America and throughout the world. So we certainly are available to help your company in the areas of operational excellence with the TOPS assessment like we've talked about here. But we also do a tremendous amount of GFSI consulting to help companies achieve their initial certification or sustain that certification. And then we help companies with USDA HACCP plans or FDA food safety plans. And then, of course, we do teach a lot of training courses on site at the request of client locations. And then I did want to share one other resource with you. Is one of our recommended vendors that we also work with is a company called Blue Wave Analytics. So you can also look at their website at bluewaveanalytics.com. They essentially create performance dashboards for any type of operational metrics, along with sales and executive dashboards as well. So I'd encourage you to take a look at their website and their company to help measure things that may be beneficial for your company as well. So with that, Brian, I left a few minutes for some questions on the end, and I'll turn it back over to you and be happy to answer any questions that have come in.
No, that's fantastic. Well, thank you again. You always add so much value. We're getting tons of really great feedback. So I love that you covered virtually every part of the company, because I think a lot of times with our customers, we think, very myopically about KPIs, and we kind of do it the same way, or the way we've always done it. I think you've really shared some really unique perspectives on this. So this was really great. We do have some questions coming in. We'll try and keep these, make sure we get out on time, but I'll sneak in what I can if you're up for a couple, Jeff.
Absolutely.
So one that came in was about suppliers, right? So there's a lot of KPIs here, and in general, the question is, how do we hold the suppliers more accountable? And I guess I'll add a question to the back end of that is, do you have any suggested KPIs around the supplier side?
Absolutely. I think your supplier compliance and conformance is absolutely critical. I certainly think SafetyChain is a great product to help coordinate all the information to manage your supply chain as well. But one of the ways to be able to do that and to measure the effectiveness of your suppliers is to keep up with that supplier non-conformance log. So just like you would have a product hold log for any type of product that you made internally that may have been out of specification, then I would encourage you to have a supplier hold log as well. So anytime that product either comes in damaged or fails to meet any of your specification criteria, that you would document that on that supplier log, and also how many times you've had to submit a supplier corrective action request. And then again, to be able to track that in terms of the number of incidents that you have, and also any dollar value implications of those incidents as well. And that way you can help hold your suppliers more accountable. And I'll even give you an example. Again, at the company where we're actually at a meat processing facility today, this company's lost a tremendous amount of yield because a certain meat raw material that they're buying in this case a beef brisket, contains way too much fat above and beyond what's allowed even on their raw material suppliers' specification requirements. So we're setting up some ways to be able to measure their specification compliance at the time of receipt based on some inspections that are done at each load. And that way, this company doesn't have to suffer the profitability loss because they have too much fat on the briskets themselves. And that way you can push the claims back to the suppliers as well. But, it's a key component to make sure that you're holding your suppliers accountable to meet their requirements, and certainly taking the opportunity to be able to file claims or not accept product that doesn't meet your expectations.
Right. So holding them accountable the same way you're doing it internally. That's great. Question here, which is great questions. So it says, can you touch on leading indicators versus lagging indicators? For example, near misses being a leading indicator and the accident rate being lagging. How do you prioritize between the two and what to focus on?
Yeah, and that's an absolutely great question. And certainly you want to identify some of the leading indicators that you possibly can. And you can look at those from a proactive and a prevention standpoint, just like in the example that was given in terms of workplace safety. So if you're reporting those near misses and you take action before an accident happens, that's certainly preferable to waiting until after the accident happens. And now you have to deal with a notion of recordable and different types of workers' comp costs associated with that. So, it's really specific to the type of KPIs that are being looked at in the areas. So, more detail than unfortunately we can go through on this call. But, where possible, I definitely take a look at those leading indicators where you possibly can. But where you can't, then certainly, identify the lagging indicators that will still report the performance of the results. So ultimately, you can improve that performance over time.
No, that's great. And you gave so many great examples. I think I'd encourage everybody to go back and look at the different lists that you suggested, because I think you had both some leading and lagging in each of those groups there. So you got another question, Jeff, that came in. This is good too. So in which segment of the food plant operation is the KPI much more critical than the rest of operations? So this is probably a question you get a lot. Essentially, where do you start, right? If you had to pick one. But from your perspective, where do you feel like the KPIs make the biggest impact?
Yeah, I usually always like to start in the packaging departments, and that's where most of the action's happening. But certainly where the importance is in terms of making sure that the product being packaged is meeting the labeling requirements and your specification requirements and your customer requirements. So I like to look at that first to make sure that we're producing the right product first, and then start analyzing, when did those incidents of non-compliance occur? Like, how much product are they having to rework, or how much product has to be rehandled for some reason? How many leakers are being produced on vacuum package lines? And then, of course, how the way the product's being handled from a GMP compliance standpoint as well. So, I usually start at that packaging process, and then I work my way back from there.
Oh, that's good. And a follow-up to that is, and this probably can dovetail into another question about kind of buy-in, but the follow-up question they had here was how much support is required from the management for this aspect to be implemented positively? So maybe another way to put this is, how do you get buy-in from senior management, right? Which is common when you're trying to implement changes like this.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of quality assurance managers. And
sure.
I always encourage them to point back, especially if they're certified under a GFSI standard, to point back to the management commitment section that does require companies to be able to dedicate the resources that are needed in terms of the personnel and the capital expenditures and other types of resources that are necessary to be able to make sure your food safety and quality systems are optimized along with your operational systems. So, I'd definitely give them a general reminder that, hey, this isn't an option, but you're actually required to do this by the GFSI standards.
Sure.
I can share one example where one time I actually cited a major nonconformance during an SQF audit because I went through an entire audit over a 3-day process and was never able to interact with anyone other than the QA manager. And they didn't even have anyone else in the entrance meetings or the exit meetings. And, she was obviously very flustered all the way through the audit. And I cited a major nonconformance for not having the right culture in the company and the management commitment. So maybe an issue. And the other way that I really try to encourage companies to do it is, take some time and do some awareness training with the senior management. And, there's a saying that nobody listens to a prophet in their own hometown. So, I would actually encourage you to bring in someone like Alchemy Consulting or another group, third-party type group that can take time and maybe even just do a 1 or 2 hour presentation to the senior management team to talk about what the regulatory and the audit standards require and then what type of resources they need to provide, and then how it can impact your business. And ultimately, are you preventing those food recalls and then the foodborne illnesses as well? So, sometimes it helps to bring in an outside source to reinforce why it's so much necessary and what do they really have to do. And then ultimately, if you do it right, how can you really increase the profitability? And that's when you get their attention.
No, so true. And I'll use that as a great way to transition to our exit, because I think not only having the outside folks, but having the expertise you guys have, I can't say how much value you add to our customers, our team internally, having you as a resource. And one thing's on the screen here that you were able to offer, which I think is really great. I hope people take advantage is that 30-minute consultation, figure out what the best game plan would be. But you also think about the amount of money spent on equipment, or in our case, people investing in technology. And one of our recommendations is always to have a third party like you in there to help improve those processes before you make those investments or along with those investments, so you get the most out of them. And that's another way you can hopefully get some attention and get more out of the operations. So again, thank you so much, Jeff. Just a wonderful presentation. Again, for everybody, we'll be sharing this shortly. We'll have links to everything that Jeff shared, including how to reach out and contact Alchemy Consulting directly. And just can't say enough about how professional they are. What you heard here is just a glimpse of the insight and expertise you can get from their team, and they're just a pleasure to work with. So we're really grateful for their partnership and all they're doing out here to help our customers and everybody in the industry. So we've got some resources we'll share as a result of that. We also have some additional resources, including a recording of this webinar, and a link to the deck will be on our website soon. We'll send out that along with a follow-up email. And again, you think about all of the KPIs being talked about here. One of the great ways to get started is doing that in conjunction with the data you're already capturing, and that's as Jeff alluded to, one of the ways that SafetyChain can help. So if you're interested in learning more about that, we certainly would love to be part of that conversation. But beyond that, thank you everybody for making time. Jeff, thank you again so much for being here. It's just a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you, Brian. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next month. Take care.